What I really loved to do was to empower my students to have a blank calendar and have them write their name on a specific day. So when we did our morning meetings, they knew that they were having that day to culturally share.
Welcome back to Educator University. This episode is about embracing our own culture and identity, even if you don't feel you have one. Today's guest, Jebeh Edmonds, an educator, author, and cultural competency expert with over 18 years of experience. She's the host of the Cultural Curriculum podcast and author of an upcoming novel, Orange Blossom, a story about identity, belonging, and the power of sharing our cultural stories, both in and out of the classroom. Welcome, Jebeh.
Thank you for having me, Annie.
So good to have you here. I think just starting out, teachers listening may say, I don't have a cultural heritage that I really feel connected to. What would you say to them in terms of starting to explore who they are and their culture?
Yes, I want those teachers to think about culture is not just ethnicity and racial. That's just a small snippet of what culture what culture encapsulates. I want them to also think of culture as a way of life. Maybe there's a hobby that they have a group of friends that they've been quilting for decades with. That is a part of your culture as well. Having community, that's something they should think about of, okay, what is my way of life that I can share? What traditions do I have that I can share with my students? I live in northern Minnesota, so we have a big group of Scandinavian families that live up in our region. So even families that play cribbage together, board games, how they make certain pastries and they bring those tools to the classroom. That's also a part of your culture. So I feel that question real heartedly, Annie. A lot of, teacher friends, colleagues, some of them would get stuck in saying, well, I don't know my culture, or maybe I'm from an adoptive family and we learn from their culture instead of my own origin. And there's lots of ways that even our students might be feeling the same way of, being in different families and not feeling that connection, but there's something that they have in commonality that lights them up that they can share with your classroom community.
It's a really powerful way to reframe the question in a way because I do think, I grew up in the Chicago area and there was so much culture and I often felt jealous, honestly. I was like, where's mine? Because I don't have I had friends that were very they spoke the language, of their country and I just felt times like, well, I don't even know, right? And so I think open this conversation to be like, well, culture can look different in different avenues is a really powerful place to start with this conversation.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. And it's good because we're all lifelong learners, aren't we, Annie, as
Yeah.
educators? So that's something that they can explore with their students together. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'm kinda curious in terms of pragmatically, how do teachers start tapping into their stories, their backgrounds, their values that they could start to share with their class?
Yes. Oh, I love the responsive classroom model of, morning meetings or even afternoon check-ins. Something very simple that teachers could do. They could start as the model themselves. So, like, for example, what I did, we had a cultural sharing day and I modeled it with all of our students at our elementary school. So I would be in the library and I just share and model. So I had a picture of my grandparents' wedding day. And that was a tradition, people's weddings look different in different families. So that was how I did a cultural share of my grandparents and their wedding day picture and how they were dressed. And showing and showcasing even the fabric that my grandparents wore was this country cloth. It was like our Liberian, kind of like a striped pattern, but just how it's woven, hand woven, and to show the kids that picture of my history. And so they could talk and have those discussions of, oh, have you been to a wedding before? What did it look like, at a wedding that you visited? And that opened up the conversation. So you don't have to make it feel so daunting or as an extra lesson plan. It's just a quick introductory show and tell per se. What I really loved to do was to empower my students to have a blank calendar and have them write their name on a specific day. So when we did our morning meetings, they knew that they were having that day to culturally share something. And I would send a letter to the families to say, this is the project we're doing for this month. Your child chose this day. And it could be something small, but please don't bring a, valuable heirloom, because I'm not responsible if something were to break, but you can bring a picture of that valuable heirloom that the child could share in the classroom. But of course, as an educator, to model that so they can see how they present and also see how they, can invite questions in as well. So other students can feel empowered to ask questions.
What a kind of an easy touch point for teachers to kind of incorporate maybe in that morning meeting time. So can I ask what grade you were doing this in just to kind of get a picture of what like would be appropriate?
Yes.
Yeah.
You could do this kindergarten through all the way up to 12. I did it in practice with fifth grade specifically. We were able to dive more deeply into it. With my first grade pals, we had a grown up that would come in and either share a book that they would read to their child or an elder in the community that was affiliated with that student to come in and share. For that, it was really fun to have the grown up come in that day to share something special with that child, with their peers. So, yeah, you could do it in any grade level. And again, something simple, keep it to one to maybe two students. I would do two students for the upper elementary, middle school, but the younger kids, when we have our star of the week, that could be the time when you have that student bring a special grown up. So it doesn't necessarily have to feel like a guardian or parent, but a special grown up that is connected with your child with the guardian's permission, of course, to
Yeah.
come in and share something special.
And I hear the educator in you because I hear all the caveats that are so important that you don't know until you're an educator. Like, this is an important
Yes.
thing to share, right? The thing about the picture and not the actual item. I'm sure that's so important to think about. Those little tiny details can make a big difference. So I appreciate that
Yes.
educator lens you bring to this conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. I think, like, you kinda mentioned the morning meeting. Are there other ways that a teacher could weave in once they start kind of embracing some of their cultural pieces, which may look different than maybe we initially had thought of? How can they weave it into their day with their students in a kind of organic and authentic way?
Authentic, yeah. Well, I'm a proud Liberian American. So even like my transitions, it would be a call and response. And so even just to kind of get my students kind of ready for lunch, I would sing this Liberian song. It was like, "Children, children, I call y'all." And the kids would go, "Mama, mama, we don't care." And it was just this funny cat and mouse kind of game of students lining up to line up for lunch, and I'll send my dog behind you. Like I'll send the dog to come get you from outside to come, inside to eat. And we'd sing this song back and forth, and you send it, we will cook it. And just back and forth joking just to line up for the door to get ready for lunch. And it was a big spectacle. The kids would laugh. And I did it with my first graders too. So any kind of call and response game, any kind of attention that you would do. And like you said, even if it's not your language that you were born with, but just to have some Spanish greetings or some greeting of the day, like let's get Google Translate and you pick the language. How do we say good morning? That's going to be our greeting for the day. Something so simple and easy that you can interweave it into. Those are the types of things that get our students engaged and they go, oh, I get to pick the language of the day. And maybe pick three greetings, good morning or thank you or goodbye, something that they feel empowered that you don't have to necessarily have that be your mother tongue, but something that can incorporate different languages into your classroom is so important just to show your students there's other languages other than English that we use every day that is spoken every day. It just opens that curiosity for students to see the language, say the language, and find it on the map as well.
Yeah, and really become global citizens. They're not just, we're all part of a country, but to think about the world in this bigger thing. And I think you saying that gives us permission to do that. I feel sometimes like I shouldn't because I'm like, well, it's not really my culture. Should I be saying these languages or should I be saying these things? But in a way, I feel like just exposing our students to those things is a really powerful permission slip there.
It's
Yeah.
very powerful. I even went on, got, mini flags from around the world and it came with cards. And that was our game once a week. We would find like our own scavenger hunt, stand by the flag. And then on the back of each flag, there was a lot of good geography and facts. So they had to share one cool fact about that country. And so another thing that as global citizens to go around the room and find the flag, stand below it, and share one quick fact. And that's something that you could do as a transition from one subject to the next as well. And even your primary kids, that could be something with just the flashcards and just showing a flag and showing the country on the globe or on the map. That's where it is, and kids your age are also at school, yeah, just real life applications that you can do.
Such empathy for the
Yeah.
bigger perspective, which I think we all need more of, I think, in life is
Yes.
just kinda seeing people of all the whole country and the world to see them in a different light, and I think also, I live in America right now, I think you do too, it's in Minnesota, I'm in
Yes.
Oregon, but I think I've visited other countries before, and it's interesting because, like, in Europe, for example, you're one little country surrounded by all these languages and cultures versus America at times. There is cultural, like, pockets, but at the same time, it's like a lot of us speak English, and it's kind of a more not as much diversity in terms of, like, each state having its own language sort of thing, like Europe
Yes.
or maybe I don't know, is Africa kinda similar in that way? I'm not
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
and especially for Liberia, where I was born and my parents were from, they had 16 different ethnic groups, so 16 different languages, but their main language was English in their government and in schooling. But they also were very, very well versed in French because they had over 10 surrounding countries around Liberia that were French speaking countries. So if you need to do business and commerce and even getting to know other people, you had to know French. And so that was something, like you said, diversity in languages, diversity in dialects, you had to be well versed in. And you're right. And when we visited Sweden, they were people that it was required of them to speak and learn English up to third grade. And for us in the primary ages, we aren't required to speak a different language other than English. So I feel like, we're at a disservice with our young people to get them exposed to different languages so quickly. And like you said too, Annie, with now immersion schools popping up in our country, and being fully immersed in different languages, Mandarin, French, Spanish, we're still getting on the ball. But yeah, I feel like different countries around the world are well versed in our English and our history. I remember my parents saying they had to memorize the US presidents in their history classes before their own in their foreign land. So again, to learn different histories of different countries throughout the world is really important. To learn that empathy, that global perspective is so important. Yeah.
Yeah, so much to think about there. Even when you talk about languages and learning them earlier on, there's so much in terms of research that earlier is better, and yet we don't start Spanish sometimes, at least where I'm at, until 6th grade. It's like,
Yes,
that should
same
have been
in
happening in kindergarten.
Minnesota.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and it feels like it's too late. It's harder for us to grasp at that age, yeah.
Yeah. Can I ask, do you speak multiple languages then?
I just speak, well, a little French from my high school days.
Yeah.
It embarrasses my mother. She's very fluent in French. She's like, "Oh my goodness, yeah, yeah." Yeah, she still teases me. A little bit of Vai. That's our dialect when I was born into in the Vai cultural group in Liberia. So just listening to my parents speaking it, learning a couple anecdotal things, learning how to count to 20 in Vai. So that's what I did with my students, first grade and fifth. We learned how to count to 10. Greetings, yakune, to say hello, jamawe, to say goodbye. So those are the things that I infuse in my students that, something different that they could learn. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you've brought in that into your teaching and into what you did with your students. So, yeah, what a great and I think language is such a big part of culture. I don't think about that sometimes, that it really does the way the words form in terms of a linguistic way and the way that even, like, the grammar can kind of signify important elements of the culture.
Yes,
Yeah.
so true. So true. Yeah.
We've just gone all I love and kind of just gone all over the place. I love it.
Me
I'm loving
too.
it.
Yes. Teacher to teacher, we get this.
We could just
Yes.
go on for hours probably.
Yeah.
Okay. For our audience, probably should come back to the topic at hand here. So
Sure, sure.
you talk about, kind of in one of the things you put out about every voice being valued. What does that look like in a classroom, and how do you really instill that in your students who may be coming from a lot of different kinds of background?
Yes. Just giving them that space and letting them feel empowered to share. And I know we all have different learners in our classrooms, and some might be a little shy, but also just even having them share by writing their thought on a post-it that's on your desk. And then you can, share their thoughts, till they get enough confidence to feel comfortable to be in that space. That is one good example. Another example, too, is when you're having discussions, you could be on a topic of a book you read in your classroom, just having that open to say, yeah, people have different family values and family opinions. We really do talk about opinion versus fact. You can even do that with your primary kids and just say, yep, that's a discussion that, as the teacher, you're also the facilitator, and when you feel like if there was harm that has been done, you have to repair it as that facilitator, saying, we heard this. Maybe this is a language that you speak at home, but in our classroom community, we want to make sure everybody's voices feel heard and valued. And that's a discussion that you don't want that child to feel shame, but you also want to continue that discussion with that child that has caused the harm in private. You don't want them to feel shame in front of their students, but you just want to just kind of bring it back to you as that facilitator saying, I heard this comment going on. I'm not going to call the student out, but I heard this comment and it really made me as a teacher feel a little uncomfortable. So I'm going to bring us back to the subject at hand. And then when things get back to it, you can, let the students go to where they need to be and have a special meeting with that child to say, I feel like, that is an opinion that you and maybe your grown-ups are feeling, and that you have the right to feel your opinion. But in our classroom, we want to make sure that all of our voices are heard. And even if it's not your opinion, and how can we do this where everybody feels that their opinion can share, but also that we're not harming our classmate as well. So keeping it in a way that that child also feel that their opinion is shared, but also if it's causing harm to say, that makes me a little uncomfortable and I'll take it with our, talk to the parent and let them know what has been said. Because, yeah, we are in a time that things are very shaky and it's really heartbreaking as us educators, on another task that we were not prepared for, but are in the thralls of. So my hat tips off to them being so brave and courageous in this time because it's very hard to have that fear of our livelihood, in this space of kids and opinions and boldness and how do we, get through that? Yeah, yeah,
And I like the idea of making it a private moment. I think that's really important, whether it's
yes,
culture or other
yes,
things. I'm really on that same vein of like, if it's something like always taking it, making it smaller and not bigger in terms of like, when you put it in front of a class, then it amplifies everything. So bringing things to where it needs to be is such an important part of teaching responsibly, I think, in any area of what we're doing. So
yes,
yeah, I like
so
that
true.
reminder. Even with behavior, I notice I do that sometimes a lot and notice that kind
Yes.
of helps to decompress it. So yeah.
Yeah, decompress, because the last thing you want is to have a child feel so much shame and guilt with what because they're
Yeah.
also learning in this human experience as well, I have to remind myself they're only on earth that how many years they have been. I can't expect them to be my perspective of lived experience to a 5th grader, They're still learning too, learning those guardrails. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Their mental capacity and it's funny, I teach middle school, so I have 6th, 7th, and 8th,
Oh,
and I
you're a
see
saint, Annie.
Thanks,
Middle
Jebeh.
school scare me. Oh my god.
I love it, it's
You
so
are a
crazy.
saint. Oh, you are a saint, my dear. Yes. Oh, yes.
And what's fun though is that I actually teach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, so I'll see the kids go through the grades, many of them, and it is funny to see their development change because like you said, 5th grader versus 6th grader versus 7th grader, 8th grader, they do their brains just change, their minds just how they interact with you changes in the world, and so I think there's also, like you said, always a component of where are they developmentally, where are their brains, a 1st grader versus an 8th grader, very different conversations being had, so yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd love to hear a little more about your experience. I mean, you really have quite a unique story about, being Liberian and coming here into America. Could you share a little bit about what it was like for you as a student in that
Yes. Oh,
way?
yeah. Thank you, Annie. Yeah, I was born in Liberia in 1980, right after we had a horrible coup d'etat, so the overthrowing of our government. So everything was like my mom said, wonderful and settled, and people were free. And if our listeners aren't aware, Liberia was the first republic in the whole continent of Africa, founded by freed African former slaves and missionaries from the Caribbean and the diaspora that came back in the mid 1820s. So English and our whole government system is based off of the United States bicameral system. And so our president was assassinated. So everything was just upheaval, everything that they knew, complete chaos. So my parents emigrated to the Midwest as students in graduate schools. They were both educators, and so I grew up as a toddler in, the Midwest, Ohio, then we moved to Illinois, and then finally settling in Minnesota in the Twin Cities area. And so being the only African immigrant in my classroom and very few African and African American in my classrooms, feeling very, how you say, kind of not necessarily isolated because we did have some diversity of other African immigrants emigrating to Minnesota at that time. And then just basically that pride of being unapologetically who I was. My parents would always say, you're named Jebeh after your great aunt who was the chief of your tribe. You have to come up with, being who you are and stand in that, because not everybody is named Jebeh after her. So for me, it was a huge responsibility to carry her name with great pride and knowing that she would be proud of me in walking this life. So learning the lessons of how we treat our elders, how we greet each other, even if you're not blood related, if you see somebody at the shopping mall and they're also Liberian, you greet them, "Oh, hi, how's it going?" Call them auntie or uncle, just as a sign of respect. And education was really big, Annie, growing up. So for us, I had aunties there at my, Head Start graduation. Like, and taking that pride in, keeping us going to say, yes, you did it. And we are here to support you. When I graduated college, aunts and uncles came in Duluth, Minnesota, where I graduated at University of Minnesota, Duluth. And they were the ones that you need help with groceries, pay that parking ticket. They walked you through the whole thing. And so to me, my life in a nutshell was never alone, always filled with community and extended family that kept me going. So that was awesome. And to see my children and my husband going through that experience too is just amazing. Yeah, yeah.
Did you find it challenging? You mentioned, like, you were the only one at times in a classroom that had this similar experience. Were there some challenges with that you could share if someone's listening
Oh,
and they're trying to
yes.
understand their own students and they're just thinking, "How can I help?
Yes.
What are they experiencing right now?" Yeah.
Oh, yes. I dreaded the first day of school, Annie. Oh, I dreaded it because, they would never know how to pronounce my name. They get flustered. Then they go, well, what kind of name is that? And I'm like, I like my name. And so having to teach those teachers where Liberia was located on the map and then, teaching them about my culture and, there were a lot of microaggressions, macroaggressions from teachers and classmates that didn't repair the harm. They were the ones that would diminish if I would come to a teacher saying, that kid called me a racial slur. Well, that's just how it is. And did that happen on school property? Or, you know, just ignore him or her. And you just felt so minimized, with the hurt and going up to the principal and, doing the things that we were taught to do, tell a grown up, and them questioning you, did other kids hear that? And they did hear it, but they didn't back you up. And then you go, well, that's just a bully. Well, he's bullying me or she's bullying me. And it's, oh, well, next year you won't deal with them. And it gave them that pass to continue to do that. So, yes, kids like me do still experience it. I dreaded when we were reading To Kill a Mockingbird, and the teacher would just read the N word just like that. And she would say, well, it's the historical context of the language. Yes, but you didn't give us the context of why that was written in the book. This was just giving them permission to continue to read it out loud and stuff. And so for me, There were a lot of things that were missteps, but also it fueled me, Annie, to create my business of cultural competency work. So those teachers have those tools of when you're reading texts like this to let those families know that this book is being read and why it is being read. And giving the opportunity to challenge that book and have another book that still has the context of racial profiling and racial discrimination and justice and what is reflected in today's time. You know, you can totally find tons of books that also incorporate what was happening in our time in scope with our younger generation to have that context. So there's plenty of books that do that capability that is modern in our time. So yeah, that's a whole nother episode of talking about the classics, honey. You know,
Yeah.
like,
We got a couple episodes ready to go, I think. Locked and loaded.
oh yes, yes. We can let some classics retire
Yeah.
and get some books that are relevant to our students and what they are facing that still cover racial bias and implicit bias and of course social justice work. Yeah, yeah.
I am kinda curious, you mentioned the work that you do. Could you share a little bit more? You talk about your current business. What exactly cultural competency? Is it a coaching program, or what exactly is it that you're doing?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
kind of twofold with Jeva Cultural Consulting. I've done trainings for over 80 organizations, for profit, not for profit, on just that. How can we be inclusively welcoming and belonging in our workplaces? And also with our educators, how do we become culturally responsive with our students? So I've got lesson plans that are on African American heritage and African heritage and cultural studies. That's K through 12. That's Common Core, sufficient and compliant. And then there is coaching programs as well that I have on my website that professionals can download cultural competency programs and video tutorials and resources right there. They can even have cultural competency trainings for educators too. I even have code switching 101. Why do students have different vernacular and change their way that they appear and show up in your classroom? That's code switching, you know, because of their psychological safety with their peers versus being in front of you in their classroom. Why your African colleague code switches with how she speaks in her dialect with her community versus in a boardroom giving a presentation. She's code switching, you know? And so those are the types of trainings that I have on my website that is on demand and it's self-paced that they can do. And then they can meet with me too on Zoom for coaching calls as well after they've taken the course. It's a part of the program that they can have a one-on-one facilitation with me to unpack what they just learned.
Yeah, well, that's a lot of information and a lot of resources that you do have available, so it's good to hear that if a listener is listening, they're wanting more, that they can access you, and I will definitely get your description information, all the stuff, in the description below once we get started here. I kinda wanna ask you too, you mentioned the resources in terms of the classes, but you also have a book coming out, The Orange Blossom. Do you wanna share about what's that about?
Yes, it just published. It just launched
Published, okay,
last
yeah.
week. Oh, yes, I'm
Oh
so
my gosh,
excited.
congratulations, last week.
Yes, yes, and I'm so excited to announce this, Annie. We are number 1 on Amazon's hot new releases for immigration fiction. Like, it just posted
Congratulations.
yesterday. Thank you, thank
Wow,
you.
huge
Yes.
accomplishment. Yeah.
Thank you, my dear. So yes, The Orange Blossom is a African novella. It is a soap opera, very good, entertaining book about the haves versus the have-nots. And it takes place right before the coup in Liberia, late 1970s, early 80s of Jovia Collins. And she was born into this family of upper echelon emigrates to the Midwest in Michigan and how she deals with being a student, being the only Black daughter and African student in her classroom, and the discrimination she faced, but also being unapologetically Liberian in who she is. And she gets through all of these twists and turns, and something comes about in her life, and she gets a letter in the mail that is addressed the truth. and everything what she knew comes to fruition. And what does she have to do with this, you know, this big surprise of what she thought she knew is completely turned upside down. And it's just an entertaining book, not for students. This is for the teachers only. If you were to read it, I would read it in academia and have it as fiction literature for your students. Maybe you want it as African literature for your students in academia, but not something you read during snack time for your students. There's some there's some spicy spots in there. Some of my nieces are like, "Oh, can we read it?" So no, 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 not till you're in college. You can read that book, but it's
Good
very
clarification.
entertaining. Yes, it's very opposite of not totally opposite of cultural competency work in my business, but it's to the point of just understanding families are multifaceted and just big character arcs that you can root for folks and you can just go, "Oh, this person's really the villain in the story." So, yeah. Yeah, think
I'm
of it
already
like an
engaged. I
African
wanna read
soap
it.
opera. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm ready to read. I love to read, so I'm like, that's on my list.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it's nice and short, Annie. It's a novella, so it's
Okay.
less than 160 pages long, and it's a good, quick story. Yeah, that'll keep you on
Yeah,
your
I'll have to
toes.
read it. I love reading different things, and I'm always exposing myself to new genres and backgrounds and stuff, and yeah, it'll be fun. I'll have to read that.
I
Yeah,
can't wait for you to read it.
yeah.
Yes, yes.
So, I mean, we've gone all over in the best way possible in this conversation, and I'm just like, wow, you're right. We've got like tons of episodes I think we could film because you and I could just go on forever.
Yes, I love it.
But I think we'll just kind of culminate here. Are there any final thoughts that you have in terms of being, especially, I think we started the conversation talking about teachers finding their own culture and kind of
Yes.
really embracing themselves, even if they don't feel like they have a huge identity. Do you have any final thoughts kind of on that for a teacher as we kind of finish
Yes.
off the conversation? Yeah.
Yes, Annie, your culture is valid. I want you to take that. Your culture is worthy. No matter what you feel that you carry, that's something to take pride in. There's no contest of which culture has the best. And yes, you can see other cultures and admire and love what they're doing for traditions, but you also have a tradition. You know, at our family, every time we have because we're big Minnesota Vikings fans, we have chili cook-off in our household. So when it's our first home game, it's like Edmonds Chili Fest. Like, what is your thing that you have with your family that you hold dear? That's your culture, that's your tradition. So take pride in that. Don't feel like your pride isn't valued or valuable. Show that with your students. And another thing with my educators that are listening, you're gonna flub, you're gonna make mistakes. And we're all learning. I think as lifelong learners and even as teachers, I would always say when I had my classroom, I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to flub. Give me some patience and let's keep learning together. And I think your students will really admire that you're also human. You're not robotic. If you make a mistake, oh, Mrs. Edmonds made a mistake. Let's curtail and get back to it. I'll do the work to do better. And students will feel the power to, help, correct you too. "Oh, Mrs. Edmonds, that's not how we do it." And, "Oh, I love to wear my hair long. Oh, thank you for correcting me. I will do better." That's something that students feel like, yeah, my teacher's a human being as well, and she wants to do better. And that's something too. I feel like teachers are afraid of doing the wrong thing, and you have to embrace that you will. We got to move on from, "I'm afraid I'll do the wrong thing, so I won't do anything." No, you will, but you need to move forward to value your students and the identities that they carry. Yeah,
Well, and you and I are on the same wavelength. I just did a video, I posted it as my own channel, was about teaching bad lessons. And I think it's kind of that same idea. It's like you're gonna have lessons that just are not good, but you tried something new. And maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. And same thing here. It's like sometimes you're trying something new and there's gonna be a little bit of a learning curve. And that's just totally normal to listen to hear that and be like, yeah, it's totally normal to have mistakes.
totally normal. And
Yeah.
Annie, like when you're learning a new lesson or new unit, we fumble the first time we
Hmm.
do it. Think of
Yeah.
it like that capacity. Like we're going to
Yeah.
fumble and that's okay. That's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I love that message. Finishing us off there, we actually have some fun questions I ask every guest just to kind of get to know you a little better.
sure.
And you can answer as quick or as long as you'd like. So, first question here is favorite teacher lunch.
Favorite teacher at lunch? Oh, like if I'm in the staff lounge?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, favorite teacher lunch. Oh my gosh. Those healthy choice power bowls, the one that has the plantains in it. Ooh, I love plantains. So when I would heat that up, it was just had the nice savory and sweet. It was like a rice bowl. It was so good. Yeah, that was my favorite in the staff lounge. Yeah, I loved it.
A treat, right? A little
Little
afternoon.
afternoon treat, a little spice in there. Yeah,
Love
yeah.
it. Your best behavior management tip for a classroom?
Oh, ooh, my best behavior management tip for the classroom. My biggest thing was when, oh gosh, I would even do like the show five, show five, the hands. I would even speak a little bit in French. And then the students were like, what? And I'd just be saying, excusez-moi, like my little last niblets. I'm sorry, Mademoiselle Collins. I couldn't remember from French class. But they would stop. They would stop what they were doing and like, what is Mrs. Edmonds up to now? Kind of, my best teacher advice from one of my colleagues, shout out to you, Lisa B. She would say, act weird, be weird. And that's when they were on their best behavior when you start talking like in a Valley Girl voice, like, oh my gosh, you're not listening to me right now. And they're like, what is she doing? The weirder I was, the more like engaged that they were. And then we got to it. Like, okay, now that you're listening, I'll get back to my teacher voice. And then I would get back in and they're like, oh my gosh, they didn't know what I was up to next, And that to me was the best behavior management tool. Was, yeah, to get their attention to do what you needed to do was the biggest one. Yeah,
Yeah, it's almost
yeah.
like breaks the pattern of their brain. They're like, they see you in one spot and then you just change it around and they're like, "Oh,
Yes,
wait, what?" It gets their attention, gets them stop talking,
yes,
right? Yeah.
totally.
I love that idea.
Yeah, yeah.
Teacher that made a difference in your life.
Oh, goodness. I've got 2. But my mother, first and foremost, she was a first grade teacher for over 30 years. She's been retired, I want to say the last 4. And I would just watch her and just be enumerated by how she taught her students and how she had her energy and dancing and really made some really big, moments and strides with her students. In college, Dr. Joki Kamau, she was from Kenya and she put me under her wing. And, again, being further north, in Minnesota, there are not a lot of African students and professors and not a lot of African people in that area. And so for me, I felt like I was at home. I felt like I belonged in her classroom. She taught women's studies and she was the department head. And we still meet for coffee every once in a while. She's still a big mentor in my life. And so those 2 women really shaped me as an educator. That, yeah, I have to give them their flowers. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Last question here for quick questions is last lesson you taught.
Last lesson I taught was I was an adjunct professor at the College of Saint Scholastica. So I was teaching senior education students ready to graduate to have their own classroom. And it was all about teaching for inclusion, just like we've been talking about how to teach for inclusion. So the last lesson I taught was them to teach their own racial autobiographies and learning from their own lens of how they saw race in the classroom. And that was one of the most powerful lessons I ever taught. Yeah. And I did that, I want to say, oh my gosh, 5 years ago. Yeah. When I started to do this consulting full time on my own when I left the classroom. So, yeah, it was a really powerful classroom. Yeah. And the
Yeah.
students were great. Yeah. Awesome group of kids. Yeah. That are teaching now in their own classrooms. So, very cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
full circle moment there, right? To teach
Yeah.
teachers.
Yeah. Awesome moment. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Jebeh, thank you so much for being here today. So much great information, so much great value for teachers, and I've just had a blast, so that's the best part, I
I
think.
had so much fun with you too, Annie.
Yeah,
Thank you
it's
for
such a
having
fun
me on your
time.
show.
I wanna
Yeah.
make sure that you get, that they can reach you, so could you kinda share where's the best spot they can reach you? I will link it right below this episode as well.
Yes. You can reach me on my website at jebehedmonds.com, JEBEHEDMUNDS.com. It's got information on where to buy my book, as well as all of my resources, lesson plans, and tutorial videos as well. So, yeah, it's all there. One stop shop.
Thanks so much for being here.
Oh, thank you, Annie.